Welcome to another episode of the XR Magazine podcast. I am Diana Olenik, your host, and today we're going to be speaking about Ovid Works. So, who is Ovid Works? They started in 2015 as a passion project inspired by the love for literature and games. She's such a nice cross section, right? They wanted to bring traditional storytelling and interactive gameplay closer together through Metamorphosis, a game inspired by the works of Franz Kafka. I don't know if you've read that book. I read it when I was in high school and it's amazing. Like, it's a really great work from literature and especially about existentialism and basically philosophy. Today, they are a team of 20 talented individuals working together to tell vivid stories through innovative gameplay. Their first game was the whimsical 2017 VR adventure Interkosmos, which put players in the cockpit of a Soviet space capsule plummeting towards Earth. Their next game, Metamorphosis, was a first person puzzle platformer set in surrealist landscapes where you'll play as a tiny bag. And this comes from the book, the actual book. So they put a spin on that and created a fascinating work of art and also of play. I am very excited to bring today Jacek Debowski, who is the CEO of Ovid Works, to speak about the process of creating the company and actually partnering with other companies like Meta to bring this type of works to a wider audience through those platforms. So, yeah, let's invite Jacek to come and let's do it. Thank you so much for being here today, Jacek. Today, we're going to be speaking about this amazing journey with Ovid Works. And yeah, I can't wait to get to know how did it get started.
So we started the company in 2016, but we actually started with a non-VR project. And how it all started is that we wanted to make a movie, but no one was going to take our script for a movie based on Kafka. Franz Kafka is a writer in a let's say a dark humor area. That's maybe not very recent, but I think it works very well today. And we wanted to tell a story about a guy who is turned into a bug and he needs to come back to being human. And it was hard to sell it as a script, but we also, because me and my co-founder are video game freaks since we were kids. We knew that the medium was great for telling stories and also providing interesting visuals and perspective. And also at the same time in Poland in 2016, there was a gaming program launched, which was a government support for video game development. So, and on top of that, I was really fed up with my corporate job at that point. So that was really a lot of factors that allowed us to start a company. My co-founder Jacques is his background is more of an artistic background. He's a movie director and script writer, and he creates music and art forms. While me, I'm more of an analyst, business-oriented person with strong leaning to design in terms of video game development. So we started with the idea of making this game Metamorphosis for PC, but it was a really hard project. And actually, before we finished it and released it in 2020, we needed some break. We put a new team together. This was their first project, and for various reasons, it was very challenging. And at some point, we decided we need a break, and that was a time when VR was emerging. There was no Quest then; all the headsets were connected to PC. It was very expensive to get one. It was really cumbersome with all the cables, etc. But we really loved the technology, also because John Carmack was promoting it with Doom. and with other, for various other reasons. And when we made we created a meeting, started a meeting in the company where everyone was brainstorming what game would they want to make, and it somehow ended up Interkosmos 1, which is a space, let's say, escape capsule with a story designed for VR, and that were our beginnings. Let's say our first year.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate a lot the inspiration that you get from this literature, right? Like, for example, willing to create Metamorphosis, and also the storytelling that is behind all the recent works that you have done. So, why particularly inspire in those ones? Just to know a little bit about the background of those particular ones that you're mentioning. For example, Interkosmos, what inspired exactly that game?
So for Interkosmos, there was a movie with a similar title, I think, or the same title. And there was also a Russian program called Interkosmos that was sending astronauts from different countries from space, and they sent a Polish astronaut as part of this program. So I would say movies and culture and the fact that space is something that's really interesting to us. I think not only to us, looking at the Chinese developments in this area, and Tesla, SpaceX, not Tesla, and all these other activities that are happening around the world. I think it's just something that as we get let's say, as it gets harder to live in our current on our current planet, everyone starts to dream about, or not everyone, but definitely we were starting to think about space explorations. And VR as a medium which transfers 3D and binaural sound, and it really can immerse you in, even on this early age stages when it was 2017 and it was, I think, Rift 2, it was still a very immersive experience, and it seemed to us like spaceflight would be just a perfect fit.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So building an experience like that one, Interkosmos, for example, I imagine it would require a very strong team in different areas. And I'd like to know a little bit more of the production pipeline. How does it look like? What type of team is required? How long did it take you to build it?
I would say it's a very different thing with Interkosmos 1 and Interkosmos 2000, because Interkosmos 1 is an experience that lasts around 40 to 50 minutes, and it's completely on rails. While Interkosmos 2000 is a more open, has more open structure. The story is 3 to 4 hours, and we also introduced recently a sandbox mode, which basically allows you to travel through space at your own leisure. So it depends which one would you like me to focus on.
Yeah, maybe the last one, Interkosmos 2000.
Okay. Interkosmos 2000 development was a bit rough because we started with the idea of multiplayer project. I think we were thinking about it moment where Star Trek was released. There was this, I think, Star Trek Bridge or something like this, a game released on VR where you were part of Star Trek crew, and you could interact with other players that were in the same room with you to basically finish missions that were given you by the game, and you had to cooperate. And it was, let's say, an inspiration for us. Also, we were thinking that VR as a concept is a very closed concept. So when you put it on, you are basically cut off from the world. You look funny when you play it. When someone doesn't know what you're doing, it just looks weird when you just you're flailing around and trying to, I don't know, hit boxes with a sword or something like this. So we wanted to have an experience that's multiplayer, and we started with that, where there would be one person in VR and one person without the VR, so that you can cooperate, and the person without the VR would be part of the control tower, and the person in VR would fly the spaceship, so that there's this connection between, you don't have to play alone, but pick up a family member, and you don't have to have two headsets, just make let's say a cooperative experience. And we focused, I'm talking about this because it took us, let's say, 8, I think, months of development of this module specifically, before we decided that the platform is really important. The Interkosmos 1 was constrained by the number of users that had VR available, and so we also knew that it's really important to reach the biggest audience. And it was very clear in 2021 that that Quest 2 is the emerging victor in terms of popularity and ease of access, price. And so we contacted Oculus, or Facebook at the time, now Meta, and started discussing what we're doing with them. We had great reviews from Interkosmos 1, really good feedback from the players, and so they were very happy to discuss some opportunities with us. But along those talks, we understood that they're not really interested in multiplayer, and I think maybe our guess that the multiplayer would be more of the future was wrong at the time, and so we shifted to a single player mode, which is basically Interkosmos 2000 that you can play now. And that creating this game took us around 1 year, I would say. Maybe a bit more. Part of the team was obviously designers, programmers, and artists, and this would be 4, more or less. On different parts of the project, obviously, we were doing some other things, but let's say that would be the scope of the team to create such a game. And outsourcing, animations, of course, that as well, for the hands, and eventually anything that needs to be animated in a specific or stylized way. We had to hire some actors for voiceovers. That was all handled by our external company that handled the whole audio area. And the pipeline was iteration. So we kind of work in a mixed way of agile and waterfall, let's say, where we have a big plan of milestones that we want to reach in certain areas or at certain times, in according to our schedule for release, and we also had some milestones with Facebook. But on the other hand, creating a game is a lot about experience, and sometimes things look nice on paper and then they're not so fun to play anymore when you implement them. So we always have to adjust the schedule on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to be able to test what we're implementing and make adjustments to the plans and to the scope of the game.
Yeah, thank you. I took a look at the game. Of course, the art part, it looks very well done, and the narrative, it's pretty interesting. My question is, how long, just only to assemble the narrative and the story, how long did it take you, and how was that experience creating like a narrative that actually makes people to feel immersed? Because I believe, according to the reviews, this is one of the best things that people are saying about that game. So I'm interested to know how was that assembled?
Well, I would say I think for VR specifically, immersion is the critical part, and everything needs to work in order for the immersion to be real. And definitely the plot or the narrative is part of it. But I wouldn't say it's the most critical part. I think all the other parts have to work really well in order for the narrative to be perceived as some. Because narrative is most obvious one. There are people talking behind you. You have to make some decisions. The narrative is driving your actions and giving you objectives. So you have to go now to the space station. Now you have to visit this AI, etc., etc. But so this is the easiest way. This is the easiest thing to appreciate as a player. But I think in order to be able to do that, you really need to have all the other things in place. So you have to have a high frame rate, which was really the biggest challenge for us to create something that looks nice and works well on Quest, which is basically a mobile. And so the narrative, I would say, it was 2 months of development, or like writing and iterating on it. And obviously, we were doing some adjustments based on the changes to the gameplay. But 2 months was where we were really working on it and iterating on it, specifically writing dialogues, and then recording all the voiceovers takes a couple of days. Then you need to plan also to do some additional recordings by the end of the production. So any changes that you make to the gameplay or to the structure of the game, which is, I think, quite common in development of such a complex structure as a game, are a must. But what we really focused is frame rate, and also the fact that you don't feel lost in the capsule. So how to adjust the size of the letters. By concept, it's a complicated thing to fly a spaceship. So how to make it playable, how to make it real or realistic, at least in terms of relation to actual space flights. And how to avoid motion sickness. By the way, this is one thing that the helmet helps us a lot, because it gives you a point of reference that's strictly tied to where you're looking at in the game. So you can always see the bottom of it, and that puts you in the space more firmly, which helps a lot with motion sickness. So I think all those factors need to work in order for the game to then shine through narrative. Thank you for saying that it's something that you think that people enjoy. I also hope so. The narrative we created, I think, is very specific. I think it's a very subjective thing whether you like it. Well, it's like with a book or with a movie, I guess. But we were always going for something a bit lighter, a bit more funnier. Because the space is in general a very serious concept, so we wanted to have this kind of balance in this area.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing all that production process. I think that is very illustrative of how definitely in the back end all of these processes and operations are happened. There is a lot that goes into creating a game per se. And this is a great example of how that was achieved. I think that when we see the games in the store, we really don't know the background, don't know who are the creators behind the story of them, the struggles, etc. So it's great to bring all of this knowledge here and to connect from that side, the storytelling side, because it's the real process that happened to create the game. So speaking about struggles, I wonder what have been the major challenges that you'd like to share and how you were able to navigate through them and finally overcome them.
One of the struggles we overcame in Interkosmos 1, but because Interkosmos 2, because 2000, because it's the second part, is definitely something that was easier to make from the overall, let's say, concept perspective. But I would say the biggest struggle was creating a balance between reality and gamification of spaceflight. So I guess it can be argued whether this is a simulator or not, but it is, I think, the seen as one. But there were a lot of things, or there are a lot of things that need to happen in a space capsule for it to basically fly through space, and most of them are automatic. You don't really press so many buttons when you do that. So the biggest challenge was to design the capsule that allows you to have access to all the important elements that are required to navigate space, to make them structured in a way that is easily reachable, visually clear, allows for the textures to be the right size, and the things that are written under the buttons to be the correct size and font. And so I think that was a very big challenge from the artistic perspective, and I think from the design perspective, on top of creating those systems, obviously, and gamifying them, and thinking how a system that is supposed to work automatically can malfunction and how you can interact with it. I think the biggest challenge was to create this orbital transfer, because we wanted, and I think we mostly achieved it, we wanted to really adhere to the physics that are behind this, and this is a very precise maneuver. It takes some time for you to see the results. There's a lot of information that you need to process to succeed, and how to design this both from backend perspective. So how the system should work in the capsule, how the physics should be represented, how the calculations need to be done in order for it to be more realistic, was one thing, and the other was the actual implementation. So the UI and how we convey the information to the players so they're not lost, while retaining the fun factor throughout the game.
Wow. It sounds like a huge challenge because there are so many elements playing there for all it to come together and work. So it's the art, it's the UI assemble, and the mechanics and the game and the story and everything. Yeah. So wow, it's a lot of work. I appreciate the details so we understand how that experience that we see there, it was really, really like there was a lot of struggles and stuff and to come to life, but it is an excellent product and people is appreciating it. So it seems you're also working in other projects right now. If you want to mention a couple of them and what are they about?
I think the one that I would like to mention the most is Metamorphosis. It's the game that we basically started the studio to fund, to create. And why I'm mentioning it now specifically, even though it was released 2 years ago, is because we obtained the rights to it, because we misjudged the complexity of the game when we were developing it, specifically because it happens in the micro world. So you are a tiny bug, and that creates a lot of problems in design in Unreal Engine. But also we wanted to tell a story from Kafka's books that is happening in a real size. So also this combination of small character with their immediate surrounding and what they can engage with together with this huge narrative happening in the background, challenge from all the perspectives, visuals and programming to make it smooth, and the narrative, and everything was harder than we anticipated, even though we cut the game like a couple of times throughout the development. So we needed to go to the publisher to finish it, and the publisher supported the development and the porting, and yeah, I wouldn't say they did a really great job. So recently we came back to them and say, listen, give us back our title, because according to the agreement they were supposed to have it for 5 years, but we convinced them to give it back to us because we think that we can handle it better. So now we're working really hard on promoting this game. It won, a couple of awards, like SEL awards for music score. We have amazing soundtrack in this game, and many other. It was finalist of many other let's say exhibitions, but it never really got a wider audience. So we're hoping now with various activities to promote it a bit more. Other than that, we are also working on Nemesis Distress together with Awaken Realms. It's also a game in space, but it's a horror, multiplayer horror. So let's say we could a bit expand our multiplayer experience through Nemesis Distress. It's still in early access, but it recently, I think 10th of October this month, got a really significant update that people really love. But again, it's hard to promote a game that's in early access and that already had a launch a couple of months ago. So unless we really pour money into marketing and launch the final product, it's hard to get the word out. So definitely something that I would like to mention.
Mm-hmm.
But most of it, definitely Interkosmos 2000. We're still developing it. We updated the game I think this week or last week, maybe last week, with this sandbox mode, and we're planning to add some more features to it going forward. So definitely check this out as well.
Wow, that sounds so great. A lot of interesting stuff to explore out there. I'm pretty interested myself in Metamorphosis because I read this book many, many years ago when I was in high school, actually, and it was for the philosophy class. So I am very, very excited about this. I'm inviting everybody, and of course, we're gonna make the corresponding invitation in all the marketing materials once this is released, because it sounds like a pretty artistic work, and it's fun to explore, especially for people who like philosophy or these other perspectives about existence and stuff. So very interesting. Thank you for bringing that to life, by the way.
It's definitely about that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yes, I am saying thank you for bringing that to life, that type of work to life, because we don't see many works of that type outside, like not with that edge, like so there is a lot of interesting stuff that I see you guys incorporate in the games, and I like to highlight that. So thank you. Yes. So is there anything that you wish I had asked you today, or something that you'd like to add?
You said, I think in the invitation, I think you like something that like a takeaway or something like this.
Yeah, please.
I was just because when I was waiting in the waiting room for the meeting to start, I was thinking about this a bit, and I would say, after releasing 4 games and being 6 years on the market, my biggest takeaway for someone who would start developing for either VR or PC or the consoles is to first analyze the market trends and then plan accordingly. We definitely came from, okay, what we want to do, irrelevant to what the market wants. And that somehow is obviously we made some misjudgments in terms of marketing activities, etc. But I think it's important to be also a bit grounded, and unless you're a developer that works outside of your core hours of work and you just do it for fun, then obviously your living is not tied to it. But with your first game or like say the second game, if you wanted to fund the really fun and interesting projects, I would start with something that you believe is something that markets wants, and then when you establish your brand, maybe shift into something that you feel like you would love to do, and not necessarily this is something that people immediately will grab, but you need to convince them a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson. We typically feel very driven by the passion of the moment, the talents that we have, but in order to make something like this to come to many people and to actually see the success of people using it, because I believe that's pretty much most of the purpose. Most of the times that's the purpose, to bring this to wider audiences or to more people to use it. It starts with how they would receive it, how much do they like it, and the initial tests, studies, etc., about what is the probability that it could be that people would take it. This type of industry, when it comes to games, is a little bit different when you have a product, even if it's an app, a regular app, etc. Because usually in regular apps we assess if like the usability and how often they are going to use it in their tasks or whatever the utility. But when it comes to games, it's a little bit difficult to assess that, right? Because it's not based on that usability, but on the other side, which is just like part of entertainment or how people, when they are just driven by the interest of playing a game. So I see
Yeah, I
even for
agree.
games, it's a little bit more tricky maybe to assess that.
I would say, I think it's a bit like movies. You never really know what the
Yes,
people will think. I think
exactly.
the directors of Matrix 3 were sure that it's going to be a big hit. And I guess it was in box office, but when you talk, or the same was with George Lucas and the new Star Wars Phantom Menace going forward, right? You know how the sentiment goes for those, and I'm sure he was spending years thinking about what needs to be done there. So I would compare it in this way, that really only when you have the final product you can really look at it. And there's a lot of stories when you read about game development. There's a lot of stories where big changes are made at the last moment, and they become the major, let's say, point of the game's success or reason. But there's definitely ways to do it, because you can see what games are being played, what games are most popular. These data is accessible through SteamDB. On Quest, you can just see what games are being promoted. Number of reviews is a good indicator of how many people bought the game. And so, if you spend some time and you go through it, the market, you can see. And also, obviously, when you think about developing a AAA title, probably takes 3 years, 4 or 5. In terms of Elder Scrolls, it's probably more like 7 years before they make a game. So that's a bit different story, but these are all established IPs and something that you have an audience for. Well, when we're talking about more of a let's say indie development, I don't think the development time should be longer than 2 years, unless, like I said, you're just 1 or 2 people doing this for fun. And for that specific range or time slot, I think it's reasonable to try to assess where the market is going and where the sentiment of players is going to head to.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much for adding that. Yeah, those are great ways to know, to try to assess and so to have a little bit of higher level of confidence in order for the game to be actually developed and investing all of these huge resources. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So where can people download, or where is it available actually, all the platforms, especially Metamorphosis, that you'd like to highlight?
So Metamorphosis, I would highlight the PC version, because this was the one made by us. The game is available on Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo Switch as well. But those ports were made by the publisher, and while PlayStation 4 port is I think quite decent, Xbox still playable. I would say Switch is a disaster. So that also something that hurt us. So if you can play the game on Steam on PC, and if you own a console, then try it on PS4. And if you don't have a PS4, Xbox One. And in terms of Interkosmos, for now it's only available on Quest. But if you don't have a Quest but you have a PC VR, give Interkosmos One a go. I think it's like $5. I would say it's definitely worth the buck. So you can download it from there, and I hope we'll be bringing Interkosmos 2000 also in the future to PC VRs, but that is something that we still need to put into our pipeline. Nemesis Distress is a PC only title, like an early access thing, so obviously also on Steam.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a great talk about this amazing production process, your artistic approach, the type of works that you've been making, the struggles, etc. It's been very, very useful, very, very valuable. Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure the audience is gonna take a lot of value out of this. And yeah, so
I hope.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insight, your experience, your knowledge. We really, really like to know about maybe some updates onto the last one that you're creating. And so let's keep connected to continue sharing the journey of Ovid Works.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much and see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.